La Primavera by Sandro Botticelli is one of the most famous artworks in the world, but we don't really know what the painting means. It is also known as the allegory of spring, referring to the fact that it is full of hidden messages. Botticelli included, for example, over 500 individual flowers and between 170 and 200 different varieties, including daisies, forget-me-nots, jasmine, lilies and violets. And in Renaissance art, flowers usually have symbolic meanings. So let's try to decipher this painting by first focusing on the elements that we do understand with a large degree of certainty. There are 9 figures on a lawn filled with hundreds of flowers, and we see orange and laurel trees in the background. The blue figure on the right is Sapphire, the god of the west wind. Sapphire is chasing the nymph Chloris, who is associated with flowers and spring. Sapphire's breath turns Chloris into Flora, the goddess of spring, who is wearing a flower dress. The central figure in this painting is Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, prosperity, and desire. To her left are 3 dancing graces, minor deities in Greek mythology, who are associated with things like charm, beauty, nature, goodwill, and fertility. They were often present at parties for other gods and have been associated strongly with Venus. The final person on the left is Mercury, who scatters the clouds with his staff. Mercury is the messenger of the Greek gods, and we can identify him by his helmet and winged sandals. And on top is the son of Venus, Cupid, who is aiming one of his flaming arrows filled with love at one of the 3 graces. So now let's try to interpret the meaning of this painting. The title, La Primavera, meaning spring, may be an obvious clue, but keep in mind that this title was only given to the painting by Giorgio Vasari some 7 decades after Botticelli painted it. But going along with this title, one interpretation is that the figures in the foreground symbolize the change of the seasons. The figure on the right represents February, and each figure to the left of him represents the next month, ending with Mercury on the left representing September. So that means that the 3 graces represent the summer months June, July and August, and Venus in the center represents May. A slight variation of this interpretation is that the figures represent the period from February till May. Venus is traditionally associated with the month of April, and according to an early Roman calendar, Mercury on the left was associated with the month of May, and he would chase away the last clouds before summer. Sapphire on the right would then represent the early winds of spring. This interpretation would also align somewhat with a poem of Ovid entitled Vestae, also known as On the Roman Calendar. In this poem, the naked nymph Chloris attracts the first wind of spring, represented by Sapphire. And after Sapphire captures her, flowers spring from her mouth and she turns into the goddess Flora. The challenge with these interpretations is that they only explain part of the elements in this painting. It is quite likely that the painting combines elements from various mythological stories and philosophy. A general interpretation is that it is a celebration of love, peace and prosperity. It would not have been a story that Botticelli came up with himself. He was a great painter, but not a literary genius. The painting was most likely commissioned by Lorenzo de' Medici as a wedding gift to his cousin Lorenzo di Pier Francesco de' Medici. And Lorenzo de' Medici would have offered the help of some of the intellectuals in his circle, possibly his house poet Poliziano or the scholar Marsilio Ficino. Yet another interpretation is that Venus in the center represents goodwill and divides the spiritual values on the left from the material values on the right, best captured through the earthly desires shown by Zephyr. So, those were some of the more popular interpretations of this masterpiece. But what makes it confusing is that there's also a lot of symbolism present that is at times hard to fit in with those broader interpretations. For example, Cupid is blindfolded while aiming his arrow on one of the Graces. It's a typical reference to the saying that love is blind. And Venus stands in front of a myrtle bush, which is a sacred plant for her, as it was the first plant she used to cover herself when she arose naked from the sea. And there are all the flowers which may have symbolic meanings. There are too many to go over, but as an example, the strawberries in the crown of Flora typically represent seduction, and the roses in her hand are a common symbol for love. And then, there are several references to the Medici family who commissioned this painting. The orange trees in the back are, for example, a symbol of the Medicis. But orange blossoms also symbolize marriage. And the two Graces on the left and right wear expensive jewelry in the colors of the Medici family. And the presence of Flora has another significance, as the city of Florence is named after this goddess. To conclude, my personal opinion of this painting is that it was probably commissioned by the Medici with the help of some of their intellectual experts who came up with a composition that would be open to multiple interpretations. There is a larger story here about the arrival of spring, combined with numerous references to both the Medici family and many references for a good marriage, as this painting was likely intended as a wedding present. But this is obviously not the full story, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this work in the comment section down below. On a positive note, while it may be a pity that we don't know Botticelli's intended meaning, it allows each of us to see the painting in our own way, a bit like modern art. Finally, I would like to make two final remarks. The first one is about the dark color in the background. This would have been much lighter originally, but it is part of the painting that has deteriorated the most over time. Second, when one mentions La Primavera, it is very much associated with Botticelli's other masterpiece, The Birth of Venus. And while these paintings have hung together for 5 centuries, they were not meant as companion pieces by Botticelli. Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. It really helps the channel a lot. Thanks for watching.